Hawkeyes News Now Sports has your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
That was my highlight of the game. I mean, forget the 4 field goals, forget the killing guy on the kickoff. I've never made a tackle. Like, I've never had my own tackle in a game in my entire career. So, I don't know. That was pretty cool. It felt good in the moment. And coming off the field, I was like, dang, man. Like, getting a lot of respect from my defensive teammates because I'm hurt.
That is an all-time stat line for those of you watching on YouTube from Mike Howell there. Drew Stevens talking about his first ever solo tackle against Washington. The stat line, for those that aren't watching, said 1 tackle, also for 4 field goals. But as you heard from Drew Stevens, everything else was gravy after his first wrap-up ever. He said he had a leg wrap that he shared with in high school. Anyways, welcome to your Wednesday edition of Eye on the Hawks. Mitch Fick, Owen Sebring, and Mike Howell doing all-time graphics there as well.
I had to start the show off with that because that was probably the best.
Little levity. And
on Tuesday.
I was loving it. He took a stiff arm to the face, too, that I was talking to him about as well. Drew Stevens learned a lot about himself against the Huskies there.
I think a lot of Hawkeye fans felt like the Leo DiCaprio meme. Whoa, kicker tackle.
There you go. It was great. Lots to get to outside of just Drew Stevens having a moment there today as we look ahead to that primetime matchup coming Saturday against a 3-3 Michigan State team that you could probably argue is deceptively better than a 3-3 record there. And we'll get into what they've been through the last month or so. Come up a little bit, we'll talk about the offense, how it continues to evolve, looking good as it moves into East Lansing, and our Hawkeye highlight with a guy that we've talked about quite a bit this year already, and he continues to improve. And of course, we'll get a closer look at the Spartans. Of course, we've already talked about, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, thank you. We're going live at 1 o'clock Mondays and Wednesdays. You get all the highlights. You get to see Drew Stevens basking in the glow of a tackle there and all the highlights that we continue to share. You can also go to Eye on the Hawks on Twitter. We're like 3 people away from 700 followers. What a ride. We're getting there. So don't be that guy that doesn't become the 700th follower, guy or gal that could do that. We appreciate all the support there. Let's get into that offensive evolution. We talked about going into Washington this past Saturday about what we'd seen from Brendan Sullivan in cleanup duty in Columbus. Had a really nice run, had a little short toss out to Lachey, I believe it was. We thought we might see a little more from Brendan on Saturday. We did. He had a first down run that was not in the red zone. Also had maybe the most frightening red zone play that Iowa's had all year, and thankfully his knee was down. But he is getting an expanded role, and it's a lot to ask for a guy who has started a bunch of games, then ask him to just be a situational dude. But Brendan Sullivan, who we hadn't heard from since media day, I think we got to talk to him once back in the summer. Yeah. He was available to the media on Tuesday, and Kirk Ferentz also talking a little bit more about could we see even more from Brendan Sullivan outside of just red zone and short yardage situations.
Yeah, I'm just extremely grateful to be able to get on the field. Just super grateful to be able to contribute to the team on the field rather than just at practice. And, just being able to use my athleticism to my advantage just kind of helped with that. So just extremely grateful that they trust me enough to get on the field and go execute in the red zone.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Tim is a coordinator, and he's running it. I mean, that's his deal. And pretty much everything we're doing, I mean, is stuff that he brought. Plays are plays. I mean, everybody understands that. There aren't a lot of new plays in football, but the way he calls them, the way he names them, all that stuff we've all learned. So we've taken what he's got as his playbook and going with that. Yeah, and then beyond the next step beyond that, but it's every step of the way going back to I guess February when we really started meeting as a group. We being coaches, not the players. Everything's been collaborative. Tim, that's one of the things I'm really impressed with him. He's a really good communicator, very collaborative with everybody. He pulls, he wants ideas from people, not just, hey, has anybody got an idea, but he's trying to actively get that, which I think is a really good thing.
We talked about it Monday of Tim Lester kind of getting some eyebrow raising when he came in and said he wanted to cut a lot of those offensive rankings in half in his first season. We talked on Monday. He's done that quite a bit. The scoring's way up. Turnover margin is a heck of a lot better, and we'll talk about that a little more too. The yardage is crawling up, and the yards per play certainly looking really good, almost 2 full yards better than it was. What is the biggest difference that you've seen through 6 games with this offense? Have avoided, for the most part, a lot of injuries. We talked about Addison Estrenga is going to be out several weeks, and that was confirmed by by Kirk on Tuesday. Bo Stevens going to be out this week. Sounds like Hayden Large will be back, but for the most part, it's been a healthy group and a group that's made strides. What's the biggest difference you've seen last year to this year? Because there are leaps and bounds of differences across the way.
I think the biggest thing I've noticed is kind of ties along with that red zone package. Like game 2, there you saw a glaring weakness, red zone offense. You didn't score twice in the red zone against Iowa State, and it cost you the game. And they immediately fix it. I think that's been missing the past few years under the Brian Ferentz, offense and beyond. Like there were things that were not happening, and they were just like, we need to execute better. But Tim Lester says, well, hey, we've got this athletic quarterback. Let's use him. We had one last year too. He probably not as good at throwing the ball as Brendan Sullivan is, but Brendan really hasn't thrown the ball much at all this year. So to me, it's the flexibility and I put evolution in the rundown, and that's what it kind of seems like. It's like it's not hyper explosive like if you watch college football, but it's weakness. Let's make a change. Now it's effective.
I think that the biggest change for me this year is just diversity. And I think maybe continues to be one of the biggest surprises for me with the Iowa offense is a lack of production out of the tight ends. I mean, Luke Lachey, we still have not kind of seen his breakout game. He still has yet to have a touchdown this year. Ostrenga has just the one touchdown, I believe.
Just a little pitch,
from Sullivan.
He's got the touchdown pass, but that was a touchdown. There you go.
If you can call it a pass.
If you're not watching on YouTube, I'm moving my arm slightly forward.
In the manner in which Brendan Sullivan, yes, kind of. I think that's just the thing for me is that like tight ends are not quite as involved, which, I mean, we love our tight ends here at Iowa, but having more receiver depth is a great thing. And having a running back who can just kill opposing defenses is a big thing. And so just a little bit of diversity. I mean, I've covered Iowa and watched Iowa a lot less than you guys have, but just compared to the last couple of years, it seems like everything, obviously, was so one-dimensional, at times zero-dimensional, and this year they have so many different weapons that they can hurt you with. And we talked about that with the receivers during the media availability yesterday with Seth Anderson, with Dayton Howard, who are now getting catches, that there are just a lot of different ways that this offense can hurt you now.
I think it's not just the diversity, but the great word that Tyler Tashman used when he kind of broke down that first scoring drive against Washington on Twitter on Sunday, the multiplicity. Because you can make an argument that Iowa is still, quote-unquote, one-dimensional. They're a fantastic running team.
Yeah.
The passing game is minimal, efficient, but minimal. The ways and manners in which they are handing the ball off. I asked Kate about this yesterday, too. That Kamari run that if the referee's not standing right there, he might go into the end zone on. He does a full 360 on what is normally just a turnaround, step, and hand off. And for a kid who, he talked about it, 24 years old, he's played a lot of football, he's seen a lot of football. For him, that's one of the most simple things he or any quarterback does is hand the ball off. Cade, we talk about what his role is in the passing offense. He's got a lot of responsibility in selling fakes, working with the motion. In this case, doing a full spin before he hands the ball off. The multiplicity of what we're seeing in the rushing offense, because for the most part, LaShawn is now going into the portal, but you've got a lot of the same guys back there running this rushing offense. The line, for the most part, is the same. Rusty Feth's gone after his year at Iowa. You're just seeing it, that motion that was so highly touted up when Tim first showed up, of how it could just fix eyes a little bit. And I think there's opportunities watching Michigan State on film that Iowa can use this to their advantage, use that motion and just do those little things that can keep a defense just back on its heels a little bit. That's what's been most impressive to me, above all, just seeing the motion, what it's been able to do for the run game. Also, and this is a little revisionist history, so bear with me, this team doesn't turn the ball over that much. You take out the Hail Mary against Iowa State, because again, it's a Hail Mary, it's named after a prayer for a reason. You need a little divine intervention sometimes to get to, unless you're Aaron Rodgers.
I was just about to say, unless you're Aaron Rodgers.
Figured it out. You've just figured out the perfect formula. Take that away and flush that third quarter in Columbus where everything went wrong. This team in 5 3/4 games has one turnover. One. And that was that pass against Iowa State that Darian Porter jumped in front of that Cade kind of throws back across his body. That's wild. For a team that turned it over 22 times last year, especially in those last 2 games against Michigan and Tennessee, they've done so well, especially running the ball so much. They haven't given away a fumble aside from those 2 by Cade. Yeah, there's a lot of knock-on-wood stuff here. But you've got the nation's leading one of the nation's leading tailbacks, and he hasn't fumbled the ball yet. And again, knock on all the wood. That's what's incredibly impressive to me is you're running the ball at a great clip in a lot of different ways, and you're protecting the football. Those are two massive things when you're trying to reinvent an offense, get it going, and so far, so good, aside from those little outliers we talked about.
That was what was so startling about that moment with Brendan Sullivan.
I think I was thinking about it too.
Saturday because my buddy Luke that was with me, he kind of said like, man, every time Brendan's in there, like he doesn't make mistakes. Like the guy's just like, again, small sample size, but like the guy just like does everything right. And then like just moments later is when he goes back and I don't know what he was thinking on that play. It was a kind of a Will Levis moment. Like, what are you thinking out there? So I kind of asked him about it yesterday, and I don't know. I'd be curious what Cade and Coach said to him on the sideline. Again, the score was already, at that point was pretty in the hand already for Iowa at that point. But just like, gosh, what the heck was happening on that play? I think that was when they finished with a field goal that they did not convert in the red zone, I believe.
I think it was the only drive where he played in the red zone that they haven't scored a touchdown on this season.
Well, they lined up. They basically faked a sneak because Ortworth comes in motion and kind of sets up behind Sullivan and then goes out again. And I'm guessing it was going to be a quick pass out to Ortworth, and the snap just as bad. And as I'm reliving the game for those that haven't watched it, but as he's falling, I don't know if he's trying to just throw it away and save the yardage or what. But
that's what it looked like to me.
Yeah, I think
but
he maybe
correct me if
saw
I'm
it.
wrong, the next red zone, Cade stayed in, right? So, do you think that changes at all at Michigan State? Or are they going to go back after a week of practice?
I would think it's an outlier again. But yeah, I noticed that too of Cade stayed in that next red zone, which again, for the most part, that red zone is just here, Kaleb.
And
it might have just been a day of the game, kind of like, hey, cool down a bit.
Sure, yeah, kind of an outlier moment too, yeah. And that's, I think, the thing with why it was so strange that red zone opportunity didn't work out. Since the Iowa State game, as we've mentioned, they've been so good in the red zone since that game, and that was the one time where it's like, it just kept going. Kaleb just couldn't quite punch it in, and it just didn't happen there. But outside of that one drive where they almost have a catastrophic fumble and they can't punch it into the end zone, everything's just been perfect in the red zone.
Another thing that they've changed, and I think I heard this it was probably either Dr. Minner or Lystico's podcast. Another thing they changed is, remember when we talked about Dominique Orange just blowing up Pescuzzi, who's like the fourth string tight end on that play, the Kamari Moulton 2 yards away. Instead of putting another tight end, they put in Cade Pieper on the line, and it's really kind of solidified. Just put an extra huge body out there, and instead of a tight end blocking a defensive end, in some cases it's an offensive tackle, or in this case a backup center, guard or wherever he fills in at. But it's just a different look, and it's obviously better to block a defensive lineman with an offensive lineman rather than a tight end.
Jumbo package, is that what you call those?
Yeah.
For the extra
But
linemen?
I think that play against Iowa State, they had 4 tight ends instead of an extra lineman. But that's another tweak that doesn't get talked about a lot that is effective, because Pieper's been playing pretty well when he does get in limited snaps.
We've talked about him too, and Kirk has even mentioned that he's a guy that can move around a lot and see some action at some different places. And so he's kind of the perfect guy, I feel like, for that jumbo package where you can put him anywhere on the line and he can get the job done.
I think it's very telling, and Kirk led his answer that we just heard from with it. He still gets questions about the offense. Again, we don't get to talk to the coordinators unless it's a bye week. He has said time and again, this is Tim's offense, and he kind of goes very Kirk makes that kind of hands-off motion of listen, he's calling the plays, he's making the decisions on a lot of stuff. I think Kirk still has the overarching philosophy, and that's his call, it's his program, but it sounds like there is immense autonomy for Tim Lester in what he wants to do with this offense, and who, I think now, as he gets 6 games in and has shown success, who he gets to do it with.
That kind of reminded me of something that Tim said when he was available the first bye week, and I want to ask you guys about this. He does say that a lot, but do you remember when Tim said, I think it was the Minnesota game when they were up big, he's like, I wanted to take a shot, but it got shot down by I don't know what word he said, by the other people.
I think he just insinuated it was not a unanimous decision.
Yeah.
But then,
so was that just a scenario where it's like, hey, can we put the foot on the gas? And he's like, no, let's just run it out.
Well, Dayton Howard gets his first catch and first touchdown in a situation where it feels like it was maybe like that too. You're up, I think it was 33-10 already, right? Or 30-10. Can we? And they did. And it wasn't an absolute deep shot. It was a slant that he got loose on and took it in. But yeah, I think it's probably just situational too. What do you want to do? How comfortable do you feel, and all that? I'm sure.
Run it up?
I'm sure it's not absolute full autonomy and a monarchy out there or anything like that. But I think Tim gets 95 to 99% of the say on what happens
Okay.
on offense. I would. That's
Yeah, that
what
seems
it feels
fair.
like. Yeah.
Yeah, based on the differences that we've seen from this year to last year and the last couple of years, I think that's safe to say.
Well, it's been great to see a good performance at home after the road trip to Columbus, but the Hawkeyes hit the road yet again on Saturday. Primetime game, 6:30 kickoff on NBC against Michigan State. Spartans are 3-3, 15 days since their game out in Autzen against Oregon. They get to come back home and host the Hawkeyes. Cade McNamara, the only guy on this roster who's actually played in Spartan Stadium because it's Iowa's first trip there since 2018. They are getting there, and Cade, the only loss in the regular season for that 2021 Michigan team was at Michigan State. Spartan was pretty darn good in 2021 as well. So Cade sharing his perspective of going to East Lansing, playing at Spartan Stadium, and his view of the green and white.
They've played really good teams. I mean, I think that's kind of what the film shows, is that they've played good teams. They have talent, and they have some speed as well. And I think, they have overall they can be very confusing. And I think, that's going to be a good challenge for us, is that they'll show a variety of looks. And, I think that's that's a part of the week for preparation in terms of, what we need to focus on. And I think, how can we best be prepared for some of those looks, and because they're a good defense, they have a lot of a variety, and just like any defense in the Big Ten, competing and preparing is a challenge during the week.
It's a really opportunistic defense for the Spartans if you watch them on film too. I was reminded of a couple things yesterday as we talked about this first trip in 6 years to East Lansing. Iowa's last win at MSU was 2012, which was a miserable game there. It was cold and rainy there in Spartan Stadium, almost a year to the day. It was 12 years to the day. That was Kirk's 100th win at Iowa.
Weird.
They did not win another game the rest of that season in 2012. Wow. That was their fourth win, and they lost out the rest of the way. Mark Weissman had a big game there and did an ankle then late, but I remember that game being absolutely miserable. But of course, we remember last year's win against Michigan State. Cooper DeJean, congrats on the first NFL sack, buddy. Great to see that as well. But MSU at a glance, again, this is a 3-3 team that has seen a lot. Their last two games are against two of the best teams in the country in Oregon and Ohio State. They were on the road against the Ducks, at home against the Buckeyes. And boy, go watch your guy Jeremiah Smith do some really special things late in that first half against them. But you see the rankings if you're watching on the YouTube channel. Scoring offense is about 120th in the country. Middle of the road defense kind of across the board. Total defense, though, actually pretty high up there just in terms of yardage. But middle of the road between rush and pass. Their offense, they've got a couple guys that can run the ball really well. Nate Carter, who we remember from last year, is pretty good, and they got a transfer in there as well who's technically the leader. But this is a team that has played a lot of, again, these last 2 weeks have played two of the best teams in the country. They have 15 days off to rest up and learn from what they've seen coming off of a bye week. This is a tricky game. This is a real tricky game, I feel like, especially under the lights there in East Lansing. Everybody who's been to a night game there at Spartan Stadium knows that's a pretty special environment, too. We pump up Kennett quite a bit at night, but that's a place where you see a lot of special games, too.
That total defense, actually, that's the only one that's on me. They are ranked 37th.
Okay.
At
I was like, that
329.
math doesn't add up, yeah.
But the scoring defense is right, which is about 45th, which is
They're
is
about
not
middle of the
bad.
road defense. But again, this
Yeah.
is an opportunistic defense that is seven interceptions, which is tied with Iowa for, I think they're in the top 20 in the country. I mean, they're a defense that can hurt you if you make a mistake.
I don't know how you feel about this game, Mike. I'm not sure if it's Mitch's roots in Grand Rapids that are coming back out that he's given Michigan State a lot of credit for this game. I guess looking across the numbers, I don't have quite as many worries about this one. I feel like every Big Ten game, you do have to go out there, you got to execute, and every game could be a sneaky game, could be a trap game, but just looking at the individual numbers across the board, I just have very little. This is maybe the least worried I have been about an opponent, at least in the Big Ten. I wouldn't say all season. Troy and Illinois State I felt pretty confident about too, but just one that I don't particularly have a ton of worries about. I think that they have a few bright spots on this team. Charles Brantley is a really good defensive back for this team. He's tied for second in the league with Jamari Harris in passes defended. He is, I believe, also second. Yeah, tied for second, along with Jamari again in interceptions. He's got 3 picks this year. As Kirk pointed out yesterday, great special teams unit. I mean, they've got. He called them one of the best, if not the best, special teams unit in the conference.
Maybe the best kicker in the conference.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw him hit from 58 at Kinnick
Yeah.
last year. Kim, he beat Maryland on the road with a big kick there at the end of regulation.
Jonathan Kim is one of 2 kickers in the Big Ten who's still perfect this year. He's been great. Ryan Eckley, their punter, leading the Big Ten Conference in average per punt this year, 47.96 average. So special teams is good, but I know their schedule's been tough the last 2 games, but they also lost to Boston College. They've had some close games with, who was it, Florida Atlantic and Prairie View A&M.
That opener against Atlantic, watching that again, they turned it over twice in, I think, their first 3 possessions. Or the first play of the season, Childs threw a kind of a 50-50 ball along the sidelines, and he got picked off, and then there was another interception and a fumble in there as well. That was a weird start to that whole first quarter between both teams was very, very strange.
They lost to Maryland, who I think we're still trying to figure out what they are.
They beat Maryland.
All right.
They won at Maryland.
Excuse me. Yes, they beat Maryland by 3, and we're still, I think, trying to figure out how good that Maryland team is.
Maryland is kind of wild this year.
Yeah.
The only thing that worries me is just anytime you go on the road in the Big Ten, I think it's difficult. I see your side, Owen. I also think this team, every game, if you watch it, it's like if they struggle on the turnovers, which that's who they are at this point, they turn the ball over at a high clip. That just, kills momentum, kills drives. I thought in the first halves of Oregon and Ohio State, their offenses didn't play that bad, and then it just a turnover here, turnover there. When they got in plus territory, it just flips the momentum. And if they could play a turnover-free game, then maybe it's a little closer. But I think I was going to be able to run the ball pretty effectively. So I don't see it being that much of a challenge. But at the same time, if they do clean things up, because they are one of the most, I think they're in the hundreds of most penalized teams too, where Iowa is the least penalized team in the country.
Is it 15 penalties or less than
that? Right.
15 or 14, and Iowa State's the second least. So,
is that right?
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Moses.
That Hawkeye State discipline, I suppose.
So when it comes to turnovers and penalties, if they clean that up, it's a tough if, because that's who you are at this point in the season, and until they can show that they can stop that, I'm not going to believe that you can.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to finish by saying that, it would just surprise me so much to see Iowa struggle in this game with how well they played against Washington. Kirk always has this team ready to go the next game. Phil, LeVar, they know how to get this team ready to go even after they have a really nice, impressive win. It just really would surprise me to see this game be close. We'll get into that in picks in a little bit, but would really surprise me to see it be anything less than a 10-point game.
I'm just very interested in seeing, as you're watching on YouTube, we just put the stats up for Aiden Childs and K'Ron Lynch-Adams, who's a transfer and that's paired up with Nate Carter and made a really, really nice backfield there tandem for the Spartans. Maybe I'm getting too hung up on this team has played 2 of the top 4 teams in the country the last 2 weeks. They have 15 days to rest up. It's a home game. It's a long day for Iowa to wait to take the field. That it's starting well is paramount, I think, as it would be for any road game, particularly with all these variables here. We talked about the turnovers. And Childs, you see his numbers there, 5 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. He's had 3 games out of 6 this season where he's thrown more than 20 passes, 20 or more passes. He's had 3 games where he's thrown less. When Aiden Childs throws for less than 20 attempts, he's completing 63.6% of his passes, 35 or 55, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. 2 of those games were just against Oregon and Ohio State. So they're maybe figuring out what his best skill set is. When he goes for over 20 passes, and I think he topped out at 38 against Maryland, which they needed to do in a comeback win. He's only completing 52.6% of his passes, 3 touchdowns, again, all against Maryland, 7 interceptions. Aiden Childs is going to be a really, really, really good quarterback down the line. He's already shown flashes. There's a play against Boston College where that should have been a 7-yard sack. He takes off and runs for 22, and he had to do some slippery stuff to get out of it. If you can get him to throw more than they want him to be throwing, put him in situations where he has to throw, the stats don't lie. He makes mistakes, and this is, again, an Iowa defense that can really jump on those mistakes and really roll things up like we saw them do against Washington.
Tough schedule for Michigan State this year, looking ahead at what they've got. I mean, this is homecoming for them, and they're going at Michigan, always, of course, a rivalry game. Then they're against Indiana, who I just saw today on the Pat McAfee show. They were saying that Indiana and Army are the only two schools in the country right now who have not trailed in a game this entire season.
Just traditional blue bloods.
Then they're at Illinois, who's been really good this year. They get Purdue late in the season. That should be a good win, good chance for a win for them. And then they're at home against Rutgers. Michigan State, has to be probably maybe the toughest schedule in the Big Ten this year.
And I think we've mentioned it too. Jonathan Smith is a great coach, left his alma mater at Oregon State where he was a pretty darn good quarterback there, and he's trying to rebuild everything that Mel Tucker left behind here. And, we're not that far removed from Michigan State being they went 11-2 that year in 2021 that they beat Michigan when Michigan went to the playoffs. So this is a program that, again, all these Division I schools in Michigan, there's so much talent. We talked about kind of the Detroit pipeline with a guy that we're going to hear from here in a little bit of just all you have to do is keep some homegrown talent there in East Lansing or Ann Arbor or wherever and get some few other big recruits out of other spots, and you can build a really, really nice program. We've seen it in East Lansing, and I think this is a young team too. Just really interested to see what Jonathan Smith and Aiden Childs by extension do over the next 2-3 years.
I'm really looking forward to them next year. I think Aiden Childs is going to be a star at some point. And they have dealt with a lot of injuries too this year. Yeah. I know their tight end's out for the season, and they've lost a wide receiver. And, a lot of that stuff is, we saw it last year with Iowa. It's hard. They won 10 games, but
that's why
it's hard to bounce back
more incredible,
from that stuff. So, I really think Smith, like you said, is a good coach. This just probably isn't the year. I think next year and the year after that, look out for the Spartans to make a comeback, and maybe they'll get a few more transfers, high, key impact players. But I really like where they're at right now. I think Iowa should be able to win fairly comfortably.
You see it.
But you never know.
You see it though with Childs, especially that Maryland game. Late in that game, he made senior throws. This is an 18, 19-year-old kid who's voted as a captain as a true freshman, or not a true freshman, but he played quite a bit in
Corvallis?
Corvallis. I couldn't remember the word. Couldn't remember the name of the town. But he's a talent. And you see it. You see he can make these big level throws. But then, again, you talked about Will Levis. There are some throws where you're just like, that's not it, man. It's not that far gone, but you're just, nope, that's you're confident, and that's awesome, and that's going to take you a long way. But there are a few throws there, and those are the ones that Iowa needs to take advantage of, whether it's Jamari, Sebastian. Would love to see Deshaun or TJ or one of those other corners get their first pick would be great, but we'll see what happens there. It is kind of a question of how many turnovers can you force when you're going up against a team that is -6. Cohen Entringer, boy, he's been a fun guy to talk about. We heard from him yesterday for the first time in a while as well about just what to expect there as he goes back to his home state, one of those kids out of the Detroit pipeline there from Ypsilanti, and talking about what he expects against the Spartans.
Yeah, I think, the biggest thing is, we started doing a turnover circuit, at the start of practice to kind of just help us hone in on just the fundamentals. I think that's something that KF, that's really his thing, is just being brilliant at the basics and honing in on your fundamentals. And I think that's something that obviously our amazing defensive staff has pretty much told us to do, is just focusing on the fundamentals. And I think, us just hammering at the basics every single day, it just becomes second nature when we're out there.
Fun little inside baseball thing here with Cohen. So I stepped away. Owen and I were both talking to him at once. You don't usually get two people from the same station talking to a guy at one time. So I step away, and I'm waiting for who I'm going to go talk to next during Tuesday's media availability. And Matt Weitzel, who's one of the best sports information directors in the country, calls me over, and he pulls up his phone, and he shows a picture of Owen and I standing next to each other, talking to the same guy. He goes, "So whose do you use?" I was like, usually we divide and conquer. This is just one of those situations where that didn't happen. But Matt, and congratulations to Matt's wife, just had a book come out, and he's super, super proud about that.
She was on ABC News or something.
Yeah, she's been on CNN, ABC News. And we were asking about, he's helping a little bit with the PR and setting some stuff out. It's kind of part of the job, I suppose. But let's stick with Cohen, a kid who, and he spoke about this. There's been this feeling with the noise outside that is Xavier Wampa, who we talked about, had an awesome game on Saturday, and thrilled to see him. But, well, if Cohen's playing more, that must mean Xavier's not doing as much, and there's been kind of this, not necessarily pitting against, but, there has to be, if someone's playing really well and earning an opportunity, well, somebody else has to suffer. And so that's probably not the case, because, again, Xavier showed what he can do on Saturday, but Cohen has certainly earned a lot of playing time and has made the most of it. So he is also our Hawkeye highlight today as well. We're going to get an extended conversation with him. We talked about, again, him being part of this Detroit pipeline. He looks at one of the best to ever come out of Detroit and play for the Hawkeyes as one of his inspirations, a kid that he talked to during his recruiting process. We also talked about, you might have seen it at the last home game. We had a month between home games, so I've been waiting a while to talk to Cohen about this. He lip reads, recites, however you want to say it, verbatim, the Nile Kinnick Heisman speech excerpt that is played at Kinnick Stadium before every game. I've caught him a couple times now on camera talking about that, so we talked about that as well, of just what inspires him with that. And it sounds like that's something, at least in that pregame, that goes back to his high school days. That's just how he likes to set the table and play before a game.
What is Iowa's reputation there in the Detroit area and the east side of Michigan? Because they've recruited pretty well there the last few years, but you have so many options in Michigan between like GVSU and Ferris State and Wayne State and all those spots, Oakland. Just what's Iowa's reputation there as a high school kid?
I mean, at least for me, I think just Desmond King, obviously being from Detroit, Michigan, I think he's kind of just paved the way, especially for a DB. And I know for me in the recruiting process, I was able to talk to him, and I think he kind of just is almost like the beacon to show, like, coming from, Michigan, come to Iowa, learn under Phil Parker, and just become a great DB.
When did you start quoting word for word the Kinnick speech in the pregame? I've caught you a couple times now doing that verbatim.
The players of this country would much rather struggle and fight to win the Heisman Award than pull off the Garrett. Thank you.
I think it was probably like last year is when I started really listening to it. I think it just gets me in that football mode. I just once I hear that speech, the national anthem, I've always been like that in high school. Once I hear that national anthem, it's go time. It's ready.
Was the first time you heard that speech like during your first game, or had you heard it before?
No, it was during my first game. My first ever Iowa game I ever went to was when I dressed for. So
yeah, that was your first one. Like
yeah.
Not even a visit or anything.
Yeah, no, I'd never visited Iowa during a game day.
Were you recruited during COVID or?
No, I was recruited, but I took my visit in December. Yeah, so.
What is it about that speech?
I don't know. For me, I just think it just gets you going and makes you just remember that, at the end of the day, it's bigger than football.
What have you seen from Xavier, especially on Saturday? It feels like the outside noise has kind of been, if Cohen's playing more, that means Xavier's not doing something right or something. Yeah. I mean, the kid had 10 tackles. He was on special teams, defense. What have you seen from him the last couple of weeks?
I just think, I just want to make this clear that, it's not a me versus him situation. We came in the same recruiting class, and I think, he wants to see me succeed just as much as I want to see him succeed. When he makes a play, I'm the first. If you look on the side, I'm the first one celebrating, because, at the end of the day, that's my dog. And eventually it's going to be me and him having the keys to the car, having to drive this defense and things like that. So I think, it's good for the team, you know what I'm saying? We both played well. And we won, and I think that's what the biggest thing is. It's all about us both playing to the best of our ability, and Iowa winning games.
You want to endear yourself to a fan base, have that attitude, and then know the Kinnick speech. And that's I think that video I posted last month has like pushing 400,000 interactions on Twitter. I mean, people loved seeing that, and boy, you hear him talk, and it's just that's the kid you want having the keys to the car eventually, and it will be him and X at some point. And I think isn't that kind of indicative of what Iowa's program can be. You can bring in a kid like Xavier Wampa, who's a 4 or 5 star recruit and has all the accolades in the world recruiting, and then, oh yeah, here's that Detroit pipeline bringing in another great DB, and then you talk about the character of a kid, and boy, you can't ask for really much more from Phil Parker's unit there.
It also is like how you become a fan favorite. I don't know if that's probably not his intention, but like when I go to Iowa games, I sit there and maybe I have a little, liquid help, I should say.
What are you inferring?
And I'm saying, like, I say that speech too. I'm sitting there in the stands. Woo! Yeah, I mean, just mouth it, But, endearing yourself to the program and the history is a way, and the way he plays. I mean, sometimes he goes out there. I mean, that play he had when he blew up that block and then got the tackle, like, that's stuff that reminds you of the safeties of yesteryear, like Bob Sanders and Derek Pagel and Sean Sonderleiter, like those kind of guys. So, like, that's how you endear yourself to a fan base and really become a fan favorite.
And of course, the play against Michigan last year in the Big Ten championship.
Oh yeah,
where he chased that guy down.
That's where a lot of people that aren't outside of Iowa learned about Cohen Entringer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly the way that you endear yourself to fans and to the coach too. I mean, that's one of those plays that we joked about. Kirk always talking about Cooper DeJean making a similar play in the bowl game a few years back with the first time they played Kentucky. And so for him to make that play, I mean, that's one that Kirk, I know, is going to remember and think about for a long time.
And I think to your point, Mike, too, I think that is a reminder as we get to the stadium, Owen and I, usually like 2 hours before the game, somewhere like that, and spend a lot of time in the pregame getting our B-roll of guys doing warm-ups or going through pads. And, we kind of have these mental lists every game of like, okay, like, well, I haven't seen this guy, or this guy, so I better get these shots. Or Addison Estranga's hurt. Okay, here's a shot of Addison in a sling. Now we've got that to use whenever. And you build kind of your video archive library as you go throughout the year for whatever you may need. If somebody gets an all Big Ten accolade or if they leave the program, okay, well, at least we've got like these 3 shots of guys we can use. So there's a lot on our plate, is what I'm getting at. Like, as we lead up to kickoff and we're just running around, getting all this video, getting ready to, there's a certain time we can go out on the field and start lining up and get ready. And that I have found, and I don't know if this is the case with you, Owen, of just like hearing that speech, hearing the anthem, and you kind of have that calm. And like Cohen said, we're locked in. We've gone through the ceremony, so to speak, and now we're kind of ready to go to work, whatever it may be, whether you're playing football or just shooting it.
I was going to say, it is a little bit, there's a big difference between what those guys do and what we do. But, me too, like I was not raised a Hawkeye fan, or I still would not classify myself necessarily as a Hawkeye fan in particular, but just like you do get pumped up in those moments. You hear the same like songs that the band plays at certain moments, and you start to like, kind of air drum along with the songs. And then you have the pregame hype videos with like the marching band or whoever. And there's always I joke about, I think I have pointed out to Mitch that there's like just a dope shot during the marching band pregame video where you see the director just going like this, and he's got 2 choppers like going right over his shoulder. I'm like, that is the coolest freaking really shot, cool. Just like something out of Apocalypse Now. And yeah, you do get to just feel the energy of the stadium kind of around you, and they don't do the hawk flying down on the field anymore, to my great chagrin.
Was that the Michigan State game last year where that hawk was out for blood? I forget if it left early or late, but that thing just kept circling the fans. Yeah. We're down there like, no.
Just walk in the stadium, you just feel that energy. And that's why I always talk about Kinnick being a very different place than even Jack Trice. And even, Jake Brent, who's a Cyclone fan to his very core, has agreed with that he believes that Kinnick is just a different kind of energy than Jack Trice is or other stadiums. And I mean, he kind of says that Hilton is the same kind of versus Carver Hawkeye, that it has that same kind of energy when you walk into there.
It's one of my favorite things about college football, and I'm, throughout my life, starting in college, I've tried to go to every Big Ten stadium, and this week I'm going actually as a fan to Spartan Stadium, so I'm excited. But those pregame kind of things, like I went to a whiteout in Happy Valley, and it was one of the best experiences. That Iowa ended up winning that game. Just those traditions and stuff, and the jump around in Wisconsin. Going to Lincoln is amazing. I've been there twice now. The fans are surprisingly
no Hawkeye
super nice.
fan has been more supportive of Husker fans than Mike Howell.
I want to hate them, but they were super nice to me, so I can't
Gave you a sandwich
do with that. Yeah, 3 sandwiches. 3 runzas, yeah.
Not one, not runzas, not 2 runzas. Yeah. One final note on Cohen. I mean, I forget if we heard it in that soundbite, but he did talk a lot about Desmond King in there, just kind of being the guy who lays the standard of like. And Kirk talked about this too when we asked him about it, that like as long as one guy from that area has success, and that was Desmond King, other guys are going to follow in those footsteps. They're watching Desmond King when he's at college and say, hey, boy, that guy has a pretty nice career for himself. And I love what Kirk said about Phil Parker's recruiting style, that he's not a guy who's going to go out there and be like, oh, man, all these other Big Ten programs have offered this guy, so we better offer him too. He always makes his own evaluation. He says, this is a guy that I do like. This is a guy that I don't like. Phil Parker, I mean, just has been the king of recruiting, obviously, and it sounds like he's the guy in that Michigan area that kind of holds it down. So, I mean, he's had some big hits, a lot of big wins in the recruiting game over there.
Former Spartan
That's right.
himself, yeah.
Kirk was sharing some great stories about his talks with Phil about the times that Phil played Iowa when Kirk was an O-line coach, and that was super fun. I think you shared that clip, and so, yeah, go find Owen's Twitter, and again, it's Kirk Ferentz. Ask him about anything from 35, 40 years ago, and he will vividly recall everything. Speaking of archives and in the past, Mike in our rundown here just put surprise clip. We have no idea what this is. Mike's got this mischievous look in his eye, though, so I don't know what to think.
So I think I've shown you guys this clip, but when I was looking for stuff on the week of the Cyhawk, we had a Cyhawk special there before the game on CBS, and I was looking for shots of Dan McCarney, who was an assistant coach at Iowa in the early 80s. He coached at Iowa State. And I was just going through each game, because sometimes there's just random shots in our archives, and we have an archive system that goes back, through the 80s.
Yeah.
And I was looking, and I marked it because it was a Michigan State Spartan game from 1982. And I was looking through the clips, and this happens.
This is why you want to be on the YouTube channel, folks. This is exclusive visual content.
This is at Spartan Stadium. Michigan State quarterback drops back. He throws a ball over the middle, and
I remember us talking about this, yeah.
Runs into the goalpost, and it falls down.
This is at Spartan Stadium.
The Michigan State receiver is giving Hawkeye fans high fives because it fell down. And then I didn't notice this actually at the time, but if he's trying to pull it off. If there's a field goal later in the game, and if you watch, there are people holding the goalpost
There are
up.
absolutely people holding that.
Like if this happened today, it'd be like Twitter would break.
That is
See,
a
if
short
you have
goalpost,
that,
by the way.
that many people under the field goal, then they can notice when it doesn't go through the uprights, because that Washington field goal was no good.
For real.
That field
I
goal post
digress.
is incredibly short, by the way, too. That's like 15 feet high, I swear. Do we know who that Hawkeye was that ran into that field goal post?
I could look it up later and post it on Twitter because I don't. I should have done that. But I got to show this because this is just the most wild clip I've ever found. And there's a lot of crazy stuff in those
It's a
80s.
Division One.
Because Owen posted on Twitter, like, there's a Phil Parker blocked punt for a touchdown, and it's just this lost stuff in the archive. So I was just like, I got to show this, let people, let people see this wild stuff that happened. Because again, if a goalpost fell down when a player ran into it today, it would be
All anybody
hilarious.
talk about, yeah.
There's so many beautiful old clips like that, and that's why anytime I dig through the archives, there's that moment too where you're like, oh, Mark Vlasic was a quarterback here. I forgot about him, that went on to play for the Chiefs and the Chargers for a while. Or I haven't had a chance to look for it yet, but I was like, I've been kind of finding some old video of these coordinators. Seth Wallace when he was at Co. I found a few old clips, and I was like, can I find anything of LeVar? And I haven't actually looked at the video yet, but we do have on one of our old tapes, Wes Lyon versus Sigourney Keota in the 1A or 2A championship game from 1995, which would have been LeVar's, I think, junior year of high school. And so I'm going to dig in there and see if I can find some LeVar from his days at West Lyon.
I've had a few instances where I found fan cutaways of my friends in our archives, and boy, those are great for the group chat. Let me tell you, morale just goes skyrocketing there. But yeah, that is the cool part about our archive system is that there's a lot of stuff, and this started at least for me with Jared Aarons, who you guys might remember as the sports director for 10 years here. We saved 9 to 10 minutes of footage from every single game, which doesn't sound like a ton. But we were talking about like those cutaways before the game of, guys warming up or just, hey, here's Paul Chaney Jr. on an 18-yard reverse or one of the sweeps that he used to run that, he was the sweeps guy back in the day. And, if you ever need to do anything with Paul Chaney or you want to remember what motion looked like in the Iowa offense under Ken O'Keefe, we've got that stuff.
There was that clip, I forget when I even posted this, if it was a year or so ago that I, again, was digging for something and I found a clip of Kirk Ferentz as an O-line coach in like 1983 or something when he had jet black hair and he was young and handsome, and not to say he's not still handsome. He's a handsome older gentleman, I'd say. But just like things like that where you're shooting a little video and you accidentally get this O-line coach, and then 35 years later a sports guy at the station is going to come back and, hey, look at this.
It's probably why we take so much time to get our video of coordinators, whoever they may be, and just take those time because you don't know. Mm-hmm. You never know, and it's good to. You can never have too much video, as we've learned time and time again in our decades plus in this business. You can you need the video.
Thing as too much B-roll.
Need the video. Get it as much as you can. Let's go to our picks, Mike. If you want to set the table for us, please.
Yes. So we got our first game of the week. We got Nebraska plus 6.5 underdogs at 16th ranked Indiana at 11 a.m. on Fox 28.
This is a fun one.
Tricky one. Boy. Indiana's been so good. I just mentioned them a little bit ago that they have yet to trail in a game this season. Nebraska looked great. They had that loss to Illinois. They've beat up on, Purdue, UNI, UTEP. They got the win over Colorado, beat Rutgers by 7 last week. It's a tough one. I think I like Nebraska to keep this a little bit closer. Feels like they could run out of steam in Indiana pretty soon. I was just hearing about them because they had his head coach on the Pat McAfee show today talking about like the changes that he's made there and the momentum they've built this season. And he was like, we were winning our first game, and I got after halftime and half the fans had left. I'm like, what's going on? But yeah, I think Nebraska keep it close.
Yeah, Indiana's been such a bright spot for the the Big Ten. They're just in football wise, they're kind of like a doormat kind of program historically. But if you look at their schedule, though, they really haven't beaten anyone notable yet. Now, I still think they're pretty good. I just don't think they've played someone at the caliber of even Nebraska, which we're still unsure of what they are this season. So I think it's going to be a closer game. I don't know who's going to win, but I think it's going to be within 6 points either way. So I'm going to take the Skurs with the points.
Until Indiana shows that anybody can get within 2 scores of them, I'm going to take them to cover. I think they are the real deal. I think Kurt is an incredible coach. I mean, he's shown it at James Madison. And the talk is that, and it's super, super early, but there's so much, again, comparison, thief of joy, talk about it every week. So let's keep dragging that joy underground. People talk about him like he could be the next Saban. And that's, I mean, anybody who has immediate success, they're like, oh, well, look what Saban did, at Toledo or anything like that. But they're legit. Curtis Rourke, who was a fantastic quarterback at Curtis Fader's alma mater at Ohio. He is
Iowa State last year.
Everything you want and more. Yeah, Matt Campbell remembers that one. So I'll take the Hoosiers to cover -6.5. Next game, Mike.
UCLA is a 4.5-point underdog going cross-country to Rutgers.
That feels
Weird
like
line.
a super close line.
11 a.m.
Rutgers did just get blown out by Wisconsin, which is still playing with their backup quarterback, obviously, because Van Dyke's out for the season. It's a weird line because if you look at Rutgers games, even the Washington game that they won, they were outgained 2-1, got an awesome running back. I still am going to ride the 2 time zones thing in the Big Ten until it proves me otherwise.
3 time zones there.
That's 3 time zones. Wasn't it 4? No.
That's an 8 a.m. local time for UCLA. They're going to have to wake up at 8 a.m. in California to watch a team that they probably don't watch a whole lot to begin with. All due respect to the Bruin faithful.
SVP seems to have a rule where if there is a really weird line like that, he follows it. He says, hey, ride it because somebody knows something that you might not. I don't know, though. I just have UCLA just looks so bad. Like, man, they cannot stop anybody. They already just look so defeated out there. They've had a tough schedule. They've played 3 ranked teams so far, LSU, Oregon, and Penn State. I don't know, man. I feel like I've got to take Rutgers in this one.
Yeah, the Penn State game is so tough, especially, going to Happy Valley. And they're a late Minnesota touchdown away from getting a win over the Gophers. That's a heck of a win for them going into UCLA and winning that. They had to host Oregon. I'll take Rutgers to cover.
Oh,
that's a good game, though. Sean Foster is going to get some stuff figured out. I hope he gets time to figure out. Speaking of Wisconsin and just 2 teams that totally defied our expectations, shame on us, I guess, last week. Wisconsin, a 7.5-point favorite going to Northwestern. Both of them coming off blowout wins, 11 a.m. on BTN. This is a wild one. This is a fun one. I think. 2 teams that...
Classic Big Ten West showdown.
Yes, yeah.
It's, like you said, I haven't got eyes on Northwestern all year. I haven't watched it. Well, actually, that's not true. I watched the Duke game. It was on a Friday night. I watched the 4th quarter of it, which they lost. I rode with Northwestern just because they had 17.5 points last week, and they won outright, which was an impressive win. I think I'm going to go with Wisconsin just because their game last week against Rutgers kind of surprised me. 42-7 on the road in Piscataway. I'm going to pick Wisconsin to cover this spread.
Seems like they're both starting to get something figured out. Northwestern looked about as bad as anybody the first few weeks, but they've started to piece some things together maybe. I think I like Northwestern to keep it a little bit closer. I think that they could come out and at least keep it within a touchdown.
That's such a nice win against Maryland. Again, a Maryland team that's going to be a tough trip for Iowa come November. Anytime you got to go all the way across and play. Loxley's teams are always tough. I'm going to take Wisconsin to cover, and that's a big spread to cover. But I believe more that Wisconsin is more of what they showed last Saturday than I believe Northwestern being what they showed.
That's fair.
All due respect to Coach Braun and company. But Braden Locke, you talk about him being the quote-unquote backup quarterback. He's played enough football now that he's a one.
That's true.
He's played, and even without Chaz Maluzzi in Wisconsin, that running back room seems to be doing just fine. So we'll take them. Next one, this is a fun one at 2:30 on CBS 2, Mike.
Yeah, so the only ranked matchup, at least in the Big Ten, 24th, which they shouldn't be ranked Michigan is a 3.5-point favorite in Champaign against the 22nd ranked fighting Brett Bielema's down there in Illinois. So kind of a weird spread as well, because I watched a lot of Michigan, and I don't think they're that good. Their defensive line is very good, and they got a couple good corners, but I'm not buying the Michigan hype. Mm-hmm. I think Illinois wins this outright. I might throw some money on that actually this weekend. So,
okay, I think that Illinois is kind of coming off of a perplexing game. They beat Purdue 50-49, which Purdue is again looked about as bad as anybody in the Big Ten this year, and so that's a closer win than you would have expected in that one. Their only losses to Penn State. Give me Illinois in this one. I think that they could win this one outright.
I'll keep being a contrarian. I think Jack Tuttle, they might have figured something out in Seattle. They're coming off a bye week too, Michigan is. Jack Tuttle might be your quarterback going in, and feels like he's a little more settled than Davis Warren and just throws it better than Alex Orji. I don't know. Orji may still have an opportunity to get in there and be even more of a Brendan Sullivan than Brendan Sullivan is for Iowa. I think he can throw, but Michigan coming off the bye, maybe having figured out a quarterback spot. We know they can run the football. I don't know if Michigan goes into Champaign and wins, but I think he can keep it within a field goal.
Sure. And then their game of the week, at least on this On the Hawks podcast, is
for a record-setting week. It's Iowa again.
Iowa again. Iowa is 5.5-point favorites on the road at Spartan Stadium. Banged up Michigan State team who turns the ball a lot. This line moved about a point since it opened towards Michigan State, which I can't explain. But
I'm wondering if there's a lot of bettors that still view it as 2022, 2023 Iowa.
It could be.
I think there's a bit of an Iowa fade, right? Maybe.
There could be, and there's one interesting stat I wanted to throw in here today. Iowa is 5-1 on the overs this year, which last year I don't remember exactly. It was
Kirk 17.0. Here we go.
Maybe one overall year.
Yeah.
And the over-unders, I guess, not to Iowa's credit, but they are pretty low. Yeah. But they're getting higher. I forgot to look it up.
The world is fading Iowa from 2020.
Yeah, this week, what is it? It's 40.5. 40.5, yeah. Which is
probably one of their higher ones, right?
But it's still one of the higher ones. Michigan State, on the other hand, is 5-1 on the under. But I think that has to do with, and I've watched a couple Michigan State games. That first game against Florida Atlantic was a low-scoring game.
16-10, yeah.
And then I think the Oregon and Ohio State ones, those were probably higher over-unders, and the other two teams kind of could have scored more points.
I don't know if the over is going to hit in this one, but I could see this being a game that's like a 30-6 type of final, something like that. I think they could be big. I'm definitely taking Iowa to cover. I think that Iowa right now knows that they have a shot to keep playing their way into possibly Big Ten title game, possibly a CFP spot. But they also know that they don't have to just win games. I think they've got to be pretty convincing in some of these wins too, and they did exactly that against Washington. And they know against some of these bottom-rung teams in the Big Ten, they've got to really impress some people.
Yeah, and you got to take care of business. I think they will do that. I see on ESPN it's -6.5 still, but I got mine on FanDuel, so if you want a lower spread on that, you can go there. But I just think Iowa's going to be able to run against the defense. I think they're probably not going to have to do too much through the air, but it would be nice to see. And I think this defense is going to cash in and get 2 to 3 turnovers on the game.
I'll take Iowa to cover. I'm still just the formula of this Spartan team is battle tested against two elite teams all the time off. Iowa needs to make sure they don't get sideways early because Michigan State's going to be rested. Night game in East Lansing. They've played some really tough competition. Iowa needs to make sure that they come out right. I talked about maybe an opportunity. Bold, this is not a pick by any means. Watch for a touchdown on a sweep for Iowa, whether it's Caden Weegan on that little one that we saw go for 11 yards. They gave up one to Ohio State late in the first half of that loss. It was a very similar looking play to the one they ran with Caden, Iowa did on Saturday. Would not be shocked if that comes out in the red zone, whether it's Brendan Sullivan in, whoever it may be. I think there's a chance for a score or at least a big play off a sweep because Michigan State looked pretty susceptible to that. So I would love to see that sweep come in. Maybe Jacob Gill, a guy we didn't hear from at all on Saturday, didn't have a catch. But watch the sweep game against Michigan State. Looks like there may be an opportunity for some big gains there. Final thoughts before we wrap things up.
I think that this is the best chance for Iowa to show people what they're made of right now. I think that if they win this game, they've got a chance to start creeping their way back into the top 25. And Kirk, I think, after getting a really convincing, really solid win against Washington, is going to have their head screwed on straight, and I think this could be a really impressive showing they get on the road.
Yeah, we're starting to get into that weaker part of the Iowa schedule. So far, you played two, I think, top 10 teams in Iowa State and Ohio State, and Washington probably a little lower than I think the quality of that team is. So you just kind of got to come every week and handle your business. And the work mentality and that Kirk Ferentz puts in this, I think they're going to be able to do that this week, and then Northwestern's next week. So I think it's just going to. I think Iowa's going to cash in on turnovers again. Like, this team that we're playing just does turn the ball over, unfortunately, a lot for their fans and stuff. But it could be the Doughboys' kind of biggest game of the season.
Yeah, Iowa protects the ball, +6 turnover margin this year, -6 for the Spartans. Feels like that's a good opportunity. 12 years ago this week, Kirk Ferentz gets win number 100 in East Lansing. 12 years later, he heads back there looking for the first win since then, and his 201st win. As Jay Higgins told him in the locker room, he's 5 away from Woody Hayes, and what an opportunity and what history could be made at the end of November, although Kirk says he's not really thinking about that. He's still trying to retire as an O-line coach. It was a fun conversation if you watched the press conference yesterday. We'll be back here Monday,
We got
1
one more
p.m.
thing.
Mike's got one more thing.
I just looked at the schedule, and do you know who he could tie it
Maryland.
with his son on the field?
Yep.
That'd be pretty cool.
We should go.
How are you not romantic about football?
I know, right?
Pretty awesome, and yeah, but you got to win the next one, right? And the
You have
next
to win
one
all
is
5, yeah.
6:30, NBC, Iowa, Michigan State. We'll be back here to recap all of it. 1 o'clock on Monday. Of course, you can follow us at Eye on the Hawks. 3 followers from 700. Be the 700. Be that person. And of course, Iowa's News Now YouTube channel will be back here 1 p.m. on Monday, Wednesday as well, as we look ahead to that homecoming game against Northwestern. For Owen and Mike, I'm Mitch. See you Monday on Eye on the Hawks.